Good morning, Year 6. It's Mrs. Mehebi here, and I am with you this week for your English. And we are going to be writing a first-person recount of the Titanic sinking. Really exciting piece of writing to do, but also really quite complicated, and it needs real careful planning. So I'm going to do this over a series of lessons. This is what we need to capture in our writing. You on the lifeboat, what you can see, the chaos, and then the calm and the quiet. So this is what actually happened. So we'll just read this bit first. On Sunday, April the 14th, the weather turned cold. All day, radio operators received warnings from other ships about iceberg sightings. At 11:40 p.m, lookouts spotted an iceberg through the faint haze. It was 500 yards dead ahead. An officer ordered for the ship to be turned and the engines reversed. Too late. The Titanic shuddered as its starboard or right side bumped into the iceberg, opening the hole below the waterline. Water gushed in. The Titanic was doomed. You might want to watch this video. Last year, our Year 6s loved watching this. If you put into YouTube Titanic sinking in real time, there's a whole video where you can watch it in the actual time frame it happened, and the link is here if you want to type it in and actually watch it sinking. If you fast forward to the end of it, you see it actually sinking. The rest of it is the slow leaning and listing of the ship before it sinks. So let's just look at our historical facts, because we want to make sure that our recount is true. So it did take over 2 hours to sink. The lifeboats were not full. Many more lives could have been saved if they had been full. The orchestra played. There was a lot of commotion and panic as people realised there were not enough lifeboats, and there was a gun that was fired by one of the stewards. So we are going to split our writing into 4 paragraphs, and we are going to start just planning today. So paragraph 1 is a bit of an introduction, and you're going to describe how the Titanic hit the iceberg and you get onto the lifeboat. Paragraph 2, you're going to row away and you're going to watch the Titanic start to sink. You're going to hear the gunshot and you're going to realise that there's half empty lifeboats. Paragraph 3 is when the Titanic actually disappears under the water. So you are going to describe the sinking, the crash that you hear, the groans of the ship as it sinks, the lights going out, the screaming, and then at the end of that paragraph, Titanic being gone. Paragraph 4, when you're waiting afterwards in your lifeboat to be rescued, and you will hear the screaming of the people in the water, then it will go quiet. You might describe the cold and the waiting. So to plan, we're going to do it paragraph by paragraph, and we are going to make notes. So this is where you either need your books or a piece of paper handy so that you can get yours planned. So the introduction, hits an iceberg, lifeboat, you can hear the music, tension, although at first it's calm, then the tension fills the Titanic as people realise it is going to sink, and you're going to describe your lifeboat being lowered into the ocean. Okay, so basically it's Titanic is an iceberg and I got into a lifeboat. But let's make that a little bit better. So introduction. Okay, you might be writing this afterwards, so my hands are shaking, hot tears are still flowing down my cheeks. I feel grief, a shock taken over your body, and numbness. So a couple of sentences to introduce the shock of what has just happened. Then you're going to go back into your recount. Okay, so it hits the iceberg, so maybe you didn't hear the scrape of it hitting the iceberg, but you felt the shudder as Titanic hit the iceberg. Maybe it woke you from your sleep, but you can see here I've got a better word from sleep, waking me from my slumber. Okay, and then you might say that you calmly gathered with other passengers on the deck and describe the calmness around, people chatting, people not panicking. You clutched your mother's hand, so we've got a show don't tell, clutch your mother's hand as you boarded the lifeboat. Describe what you can hear. You could hear the orchestra still playing. Then maybe as you're in the lifeboat, the calmness starts to fade. You look at the tension which shows on the other passengers' faces. The lifeboat is gently lowered into the water. However, the ropes might get stuck. It could take an age before you eventually land on the ocean floor. Describe the deep darkness, the oil black sea, so we can get some description into this bit. Once you're on the sea in your lifeboat, you might actually bring to the reader's attention the unoccupied spaces, the empty spaces that could have been filled with other passengers. And here I've put they're like unmarked gravestones staring up at the star-speckled sky. And then ending the paragraph, maybe a shiver ran down your spine. So let's just go through the planning of that one again. Introduction, hits the iceberg. Get to the lifeboat, you can hear the music, the tension fills the air, it's lowered into the water. So my notes are, I'm going to have my hands shaking, maybe the hot tears, the grief, the shock and the numbness that I feel, or that's overcoming my entire body. And then go into the description. So I didn't hear the scrape of the iceberg, more like I felt a sharp shudder as it awoke me from my slumber. Calmly describe how the families had begun to gather in the first-class lounge while the orchestra continued to play. However, you clutched your mother's hand tightly as you boarded lifeboat, and maybe give it a number, lifeboat number 5. Staring into other people's faces, the calmness started to fade and tension filled the air as people started to realise the situation that they were in. And describe how the lifeboat was lowered, the ropes stuck. It seemed to take an age before you were lowered onto the sea. And then look, what can you see? The deep darkness, the oil black depth of the sea below us. And then describe the unoccupied spaces, and maybe use a simile like unmarked gravestones staring up at the star-speckled sky. And a reaction, a shiver ran down my spine. That's paragraph 1. Okay, so you can see I've not written it, I've just made some notes. But paragraph 2. Okay, your lifeboat's going to row away. You're going to watch, and if you watch that real-time video, Titanic's just going to be leaning and listing, but by now there's more of a commotion on board and you hear the gunshot. So you might start this one with it. Fronted adverbial of time. Over the next few hours, we watched as the great Titanic slowly leant further into the sea. And then describe it. At first, it was just leaning gently or listing gently forwards. But and this is the fact that by 2 a.m., its nose was completely submerged below the water. Okay, and then what could you hear? We could hear quite a commotion from the ship as people fought to board a lifeboat. And then we've got the gunshot. At one point, a gunshot pierced the air, or you could have sliced through the icy air. And then what are you doing? As we sat helplessly observing the events unfold before us. Mention the empty spaces again. How do you feel? Does someone in your lifeboat suggest you go back? Or is there a feeling that you should go back, knowing that the boat would be overcome by people? Right, paragraph 3. All we're doing today is planning, is the actual sinking. So this is our opportunity to really get in some descriptive language. Okay, we could have some repetition. So here I've got the Titanic went further and further into the icy depths of the ocean, and really describe it. So if you watch the real-time video, at one point it gets above the sea level and you can see the massive propellers underneath it. So you can say Titanic was lifted above the water, exposing its giant motionless triple screw propellers. You're going to listen. What can you hear? The groans. You can hear the crash as part of the Titanic crashes back down into the ocean. The lights, maybe they're going to flicker, and then blackness. Okay, you're going to hear the crash as it goes back into the water, but you're also going to hear screaming as the boat breaks into two. And your reaction, do you sit there with your jaw open, unable to believe what's happening in front of you? You're going to describe half of it suspended above the sea, the crash, the waves, the screams, the funnels toppled like skittles, like toy skittles, and then in a matter of moments, Titanic was sucked beneath the surface. And maybe stop that paragraph with a short sentence. She had gone, never to be seen again. And our last paragraph, which we're going to wait to plan till tomorrow, is the wailing, the screaming, then the quiet, then describe the cold and the wait to be saved. So by the end of today, you should have your 4 paragraphs planned out with a little bit of detail on this side of what you are going to include in them. And we will come back tomorrow to plan a little bit more. Good luck, everyone, and I will talk to you tomorrow.